you know where you're going, you can, on the map, you can actually plot and think of what's the fastest or best way to go through. One of the things you can do is go take the boat straight across Crystal Lake, which cuts down a whole lot of time. But at the same time, you can only row this boat. You can't jump. It's got a lot of bad things going for it.
Including you can't jump. Oh, you can't. Sorry. I thought you meant you can't jump off the boat. Not that you can't jump in general.
No
Just
jumping
stuck
for
in
you.
the boat forever.
Your whole life's the boat now.
Yeah, if you get into the boat, you can't leave the boat. You're just the boat.
You're Ernest Hemingwaying this. You are the old man in the sea now.
My worst nightmare.
And Jason's the white whale, and let's see how far can we go on this metaphor.
Just a reminder, this is a spoiler-heavy podcast. Different series that require a spoiler warning will be in the description. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Gaming Theater Podcast. Today's episode is going to be an episode about decisive but innovative video games. These are video games that have been created, but for one reason or another, whatever happened in the game itself didn't really translate well for it being produced, or something didn't click with the audience or something to that extent. And we'll go over more of that as we go on with the episode. But in order to help me out with getting this episode started, I'm going to introduce us together. And my name is Leo. I am the Geek Scorpio, and I'll be your host this evening. Now, also to my right is going to be...
My name is Liz, also known as Zombiehand. I do a lot of work for Gaming Theater, and I do art and just a lot of work for Gaming Theater mostly.
All right. Now, also with that, to their right is going to be...
What's up? I'm Brandon, the Tomato Man, and I do a lot of video-related stuff with Gaming Theater, and I am working on a documentary with them on Parasite Eve.
And that's a fun one that we've got planned going up in the future for that one. Now, over to their right, that's also going to help out.
Hi, my name is Dane. I go by D and Dane on the internet. I'm a Twitch streamer, content creator, big award-winning DM, big nerd. Yeah. And I do work for GTP as well. You may have heard my voice on other episodes.
You're a nerd on this podcast?
It's hard to fit in sometimes.
It's true though. But with that being said, and also to their left is our very special guest.
Hi, I'm Maddie. My handle's Oh That's Raspberry. Most people know me. I do comics about Metal Gear, Resident Evil, Silent Hill. I'm also community manager at Grasshopper Manufacturer.
And with that being said, let's go ahead and take a quick trip over to the Magic Merch booth. Here we are at the Magical Merch booth, and today at the Magical Merch booth, we have Maddie from Grasshopper Games. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, or Grasshopper Productions? Manufacturing. Getting closer every time. Grasshopper Manufacturing. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with the name of our company, most people are familiar with our boss, who is Suda51. Our company is known for games like No More Heroes, Shadows of the Damned, Silver Case, etc. And we most recently on Halloween re-released a remaster of Shadows of the Damned, which originally came out in 2011. So it's been 13 years, and it's available on all platforms. It's $25. It's a pretty good deal. So check it out if you're a fan of like over-the-shoulder third-person comedy horror made by Suda51 and Shinji Mikami with music by Akira Yamaoka. A lot of good stuff.
It's a winning combination all around.
A very winning combination.
It's such a good game, too. Honestly, very underrated.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
fun.
Also main character is voiced by Steve Bloom, so we got a lot of good points there.
Oh, it's so fun. I played the original. Liz let me play her copy of the original back in the day.
Nice.
Also, your comics are so funny.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I couldn't not buy that compendium book. I'm like, I need this in my life desperately.
Yeah. It did pretty well, and I'm excited to get work started on volume 2 as well.
Ooh.
And we'll have links on the podcast notes for everybody out there for Maddie's stuff and Grasshopper Manufacturing and all of that for them, for whatever platforms we can get that on, as many of these as we can. That being said, let's go ahead and get back to the show. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about innovative games, but they may have been divisive or not. Or divisive but innovative games. These are games that have been around that something in their mechanics or something in their design have been actually a really good design if you think about it, but for one reason or another, typically time, or it just wasn't popular at the time, or this is a mechanic that would work better 10 years later down the line if you kick down the bucket. Basically games like that. Some games just for some reason or other, if you think about it, will have the enlightenment to hit this big stride, but also they have a lot of failures on it because of one reason or another. A good example for something like that, which a horror game that I think about, which has a lot more to it than people give credit for, is NES's Friday the 13th.
Oh no, that's a good that's a good one to start with, because that one
Oh man,
has some
yeah.
really good ideas.
Hidden timers too, like for everything in that game.
So for those who don't know, then that game you are playing one of 6 different counselors who are in the place of Crystal Lake. Your goal is to defeat Jason, and while you're defeating to take on Jason, also keep an eye on the other camp counselors, and also keep an eye on the children that's on there. This game has multiple lose conditions. If all the camp counselors have died, you lose. If you don't, if Jason doesn't get dealt with, he will start running around the entire camp and start taking out all the children. If they die, you lose. So you are also wanting to avoid fighting him until Jason Voorhees until you're strong enough to deal with him. But at the same time, he's not going to wait for you. The way that the map is designed is basically it's designed as a roundabout. So you can, if you know where you're going, you can on the map, you can actually plot and think of what's the fastest or best way to go through. One of the things you can do is go take the boat straight across Crystal Lake, which cuts down a whole lot of time. But at the same time, you can only row this boat. You can't jump. It's got a lot of bad things going for it.
Including you can't jump. Oh, you can't. Sorry. I thought you meant you can't jump off the boat. Not that you can't jump in general.
No
Just
jumping
stuck
for
in
you.
the boat forever.
Your whole life's the boat now.
Yeah, if you get into the boat, you can't leave the boat. You're just
Ugh.
It's like now.
You're Ernest Hemingway this. You are the old man in the sea now.
My worst nightmare.
and Jason's the white whale, and let's see how far can we go on this metaphor.
I think we should stop before the end of Moby Dick, please.
I do think that the real treasure was the friends we made along the way, though.
Well, the real treasure is
like
to keep
Moby
as many counselors
Yeah.
alive as you can.
Yeah.
Like, how many friends will be left?
But that was a thing on that I thought was interesting. You had you can leave a counselor behind and switch between one counselor to another, so that way you can it may be faster to just switch to the next character than it was to just keep on going. Or if one guy's really hurt, switch to the other character and use them instead. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that's on this game that didn't work right. For one thing, because you didn't know where Jason was, you could be having to chase him down at the other end of the map. Another weird problem with that is there's an invisible EXP system to let you upgrade your weapons. So there's little other monsters that are running around, and they look like little zombies. If you take them out, after so many of them that this counselor has taken out, it'll upgrade their weapon. And then so after you do something more, it'll upgrade their weapon. But it's progressively higher and higher and higher to the point that you, in order to beat the game, you kind of have to have one counselor you really, really like and leave all the rest because you don't have enough time to reach everyone else.
That one is the chosen counselor.
I actually kind of remember stuff like that. It's just making me think of stuff like Night Trap, because like you're having to switch between all the cameras.
I was gonna say Maniac Mansion. Like it
Yes,
almost
that's
seems
another
like
good one.
it might have been inspired by that because that was a couple years earlier.
And they both
So-
have that switching mechanic where you want to move from one spot to another. In Maniac Mansion especially, you want to switch around from your other players because they have other things and other abilities.
Yeah, in Friday the 13th, are they all just the same, basically, the different characters, or do they have separate abilities or weapons or?
Kind of. They all have separate stats, not separate abilities. So,
Okay.
and this is where it blows. There's a cave that you can go into, which can, if you make your way through the cave, there's some really powerful upgrades that are in there. But only 3 of the 6 counselors that you have can even make the jump to make it in that cave.
Do you know that before? Like, if they don't make the jump, do they fall in a pit, or?
And they die. Yeah. That's it.
All right.
Counselor's gone.
It seems like a classic, just like trial and error game of that era, where it's like you have to, you only had a few games, so it's like you just kind of learned everything about it because you didn't have anything else to play.
Yeah, you had no other option. This 20-minute game is going to last me for the next 24 hours,
I
not
remember
minutes.
playing it back in the day. It took me a while to realize that there's a dodge option in the game, but it only works if you're fighting Jason in the cabin. If you're not fighting Jason in the cabin, you have to hope to be able to jump over him. And only and one of the counselors can't jump for worth beans. They just
Did you have the manual when you had it?
No, I didn't have the manual with that one.
Okay, I feel like that might have been a big thing also. A lot of games back in the day, it's like you had to have the manual because it explained everything. Now, games have tutorials and they explain all the controls and stuff in game. But before, it's like if you didn't have the manual, you might just be missing on a huge chunk of something you don't even understand.
Oh man. Well, it reminds me of Resident Evil Dead Aim. Even I was doing a playthrough with a friend on my private YouTube channel, and we're on basically the final boss, and we're having to restart it, and we see a prompt that says remember to dodge, and we're both just like, you can fucking dodge? How? And it turns out you just mash everything on the gun con and then you'll dodge. I'm like, wow, that's been broken.
Sometimes it's not in the manual. Sonic 3 famously had a stage, the Carnival Night Zone, and there's a pillar in there. It's not in the manual, but if you push up or down, you can move the pillar automatically like an elevator. But to do that, you have to stand still. And who stands still in a Sonic game?
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. In essence, this game is actually designed like a horror game. You are always on the edge. You always have to worry about things. But you have a shot to take on Jason Voorhees, and he spends most of the time chasing you down or picking other targets, and you want to keep an eye on that. However, at the same time, the mechanics weren't designed to make it work right. So, when you only have 6 counselors and only 2 of them are your favorites because they can jump real good, that's about it.
Yeah.
Someone didn't skip leg day.
I don't even know if those characters are all in the Friday the 13th series, but I gotta double check that at some point. But if you want sort of a good, bad, revolutionary thing, Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest is one of these.
Yes, that game it's such an interesting one in the aspect that you think of Castlevania 2 and people generally have disdain for it. But then when you compare it to almost all of the modern ones, I say that referring to the DS and the GBA games, and even in Symphony of the Night, it's the same formula, guys. And yet we all adore those games.
Yeah. And we talked about that in our Castlevania retrospective for Symphony of Night, because its bones are actually listed in from its beginnings as in Simon's Quest 2, because it's designed like a Metroidvania. It's one of the earliest examples of a Metroidvania. But it's also very, very poorly explained in the game. And this one's not a manual thing. This is just, they don't give you the right clues.
Well, and the NPCs will lie to you.
Oh, yeah.
Is it prior to Metroid or after?
It's after Metroid, but it's after Metroid. But they don't start calling games Metroidvanias until Symphony of the Night.
I was going to say, Symphony was the first with that moniker. And I think it's just because they wanted to differentiate the fact that Metroid is a shooter in comparison, whereas Symphony of the Night is kind of just, a hack and slash. If you're looking at those two major gameplay elements, granted, there's more depth to both games, but when you boil it down to the bare minimum, it's you're swinging something at an enemy or you're shooting something at an enemy.
They call it typically Metroidvanias because it takes aspects from Castlevania 1, but also aspects from the first Metroid game. In the first Metroid game, where you can build up your health, but you don't actually build experience points for stats. You just actually have to go hunt these items down. And also you can switch your items, but also you do a lot of backtracking. Meanwhile, it is physically possible to go through the entire game with very little damage or such by using a bunch of precision maneuvers and movements on it. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is sort of your also predecessor to any of those Soulsborne games, because it's designed, when they tested the game, it was purposely tested to make sure that that you could beat every single boss in every spot in the game without taking a single hit of damage. So not taking damage is a tactical strategy in that whole game. Unlike me and a lot of JRPGs, which is at some point I'm taking it in the face.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I think like a big trend with a lot of these kind of games that fit this like divisive but innovative, it's usually, I would say like probably the majority of them are sequels that did something different, and people just weren't ready for it. And it's like, and then it's like usually people look back and then it's like, oh wait, or there's a lot of times they carry on ideas from them. Like Zelda 2 is a big one where you know people are like, what is this? Like why is this from a different angle? But you know, there's a lot of elements from Zelda 2, and you know, Zelda 2 nowadays has quite a bit of respect, but it's, you know, there's this side scrolling became a big part of 2D Zelda games. I mean, if you played the most recent Echoes of Wisdom, there's tons of side scrolling segments in that. And so yeah, it's a lot of times it's just like, you know, you want to try something new, but people are like, well, this is like, we wanted a sequel. We didn't want, you know, something different.
Yeah. It's always so hard when it comes to sequels or even like spiritual successors, when people want more of the same. And then when you try to do something innovative and it doesn't land, and then people get mad about it, but then they like it later on.
Yeah.
It's like Star Wars, the prequel, everyone hated the prequels, but now that the sequel trilogy is out, suddenly people are like, oh no, the prequels weren't that bad.
Yeah, I feel like that happens a lot. Or it's like Silent Hill 4 is a lot of people now kind of consider it as part of the original trilogy as far as like quality wise, which honestly I don't think they should. But when Silent Hill 4 first came out, it was just like, what is this? This isn't anything like the Silent Hills we love.
Yeah, but then but in hindsight now everyone's like, well, it was made by Team Silent and it's better than any of the Western developed ones. I
think it's out of desperation that they're accepting it, because they're
like down for it, though.
We need more good.
Yeah, I had a friend play through 4 recently, and they were like, you know, it starts out pretty good, but it loses a lot as you go along, and so I'm like,
especially when you have to backtrack every single thing that you had done, and you're like, but why?
So you can get back to your shitty apartment.
And that's no longer safe.
Yeah.
I've successfully removed this chain, but why though? Why?
Oh, you don't remove the chain.
Oh,
Things on there forever.
Good. I don't want to leave.
That's how I prefer my door to be. It's chained shut.
Well, I mean, if you want a really big example of what I believe is chasing a trend while trying to do something different in the medium, it kind of goes to Grasshopper here with Michigan Report from Hell.
Yeah.
Because if you consider the time frame of its development and its release, Blair Witch was a big deal, and what is Michigan if not a found footage video game?
Was it good? Should I go play it?
No.
It's so, like many Grasshopper games, there are very diehard fans of it, and there are people who will defend it to their death. If you ask 90% of the population, they'll be like, no. But so, you know, coming to Grasshopper, Suda's very proud of his low Metacritic scores. He's retweeted one review of Shadows of the Damned so far, and it was someone who gave it a 3 out of 10. So,
I mean, sorry to interrupt. I think that's a really interesting way to be like, I'm proud of how innovative I am, because like doing stuff that's out of the box and then getting a low score, it's like, I tried something different. That's fun.
And I think
we salute you, King.
and Michigan, I think, is one of those games that also gets a lot of flack for voice acting. It just being, you know, ridiculous. But then again, it's also something that people love, and it's I think it's one of those games that can be enjoyed if you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
But if you're going in expecting a really solid, you know, serious some kind of experience like that,
you don't know a Suda game then, do you?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe you know a little bit more insight on this. There have been rumors around that when he, quote, found out that it was released in Europe, that he vocally apologized to the people that told him about it. Do you have any idea if that's true?
No, honestly, like we don't really talk about our old games. We're all kind of focused on what we're doing at the moment. So yeah, sorry, I don't know anything about that.
That's fine. I just think that's funny and sounds very much like a Suda thing. It's like, oh, it came out in Europe? I'm sorry.
but it's, I don't know. Well, and Grasshopper is such an interesting company because our main audience is in the West. Grasshopper does not have a very big audience in Japan. So I think in general, he's not necessarily developing games for the West, but he is aware that because of his, sensibilities and his interests, his games tend to be more appealing to a Western audience.
He's not catering to anyone but himself, but he found an audience. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Very Kojima of him.
Actually,
I'm gonna do what I want.
It's very much like the independent music scene back in the 90s. There was a lot of bands and such that would just do their own thing. Did they get a hit? Probably not, but once in a while, you got the roll of the dice, and all of a sudden you're a one-hit wonder.
Yeah, well, and I think, the gaming climate right now is so fascinating with indie games and with things that just get popular through streaming or stuff. And it's that whole kind of like, you never know what's going to go viral. There's no algorithm. There's no I mean, you can make, good, solid AAA games, which are generally, going to have a reception. But as far as like indie stuff goes, I think of like Fear and Hunger recently, which like 4 years after its release suddenly just like blew up. And that's a very small team, small indie game, but you just like never know what people are suddenly going to latch onto.
It's like the same thing with Among Us, where it was like 4 years after it came out, some streamer got their hand on it, and suddenly it's massive.
Yeah, and I was like, I was at PAX. It was like, here's our big giant Among Us booth. There's Edgeworth Among Us. Like, we're doing collaborations with, Ace Attorney now, and it's just like, this, how did this happen? Or Stardew Valley, which that one, they recently did like a full concert, and the creator of the game, it was all made by a single guy, and he like went on stage at this concert, and he was like, it turns out the way to like, make music and be able to like do music the way you want is to just do an entire video game by yourself. Because like music apparently is like his main passion. And so all he had to do was make this insanely successful indie game. And now he's touring concerts. So
that's incredible.
Is that all it takes? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's all you gotta do.
It's another one. It's like that's a biopic, basically. Is that what that sounds like? It doesn't sound real. It sounds like a scripted film about a underdog coming to the top and finally achieving his passion by means that no one expected.
Right.
But that's life,
Yeah, there's weird stories like that all the time. Like the story of Lamborghinis and how they got popular is because Lamborghini as a company made tractors in Italy. That's what they did, farming equipment. And then when the owner got to visit a Ferrari place, and I think it's the head of Ferrari told him, yeah, you just make tractors. There's no way you can make a sports car. And he said, nuts to them. And he built the Lamborghini sports car.
Leo, I'd like to remind you this is a video game podcast.
We'll get there.
Oh, who's going on the tangent now? Leave me and Rick alone.
Which Forza was that? Where that was revealed? Do you
Gran
remember?
Turismo?
Yeah.
Is
Is
that Mario Kart?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the name of the game.
You said, speaking of, were you about to tie this back into the topic?
Yeah, because there was a game racing game that actually had a bunch of cars that you could get from all over the place. I'm trying to remember which one, but it famously had the DeLorean that you could get. But the DeLorean's a crap car, so it doesn't actually go anywhere.
So cool looking, though.
And
So cool.
I mean, if you got to travel through time, it goes somewhere. Well, why don't you just use your time travel to go, 5 minutes into the future or something? I don't know.
There you go.
I go 5 minutes to the future. Come on, baby, get to the finish.
We all know that Back to the Future is fantasy because the DeLorean cannot even hit 80, let alone 88. So let's leave it alone.
That's why you're going to see some serious stuff when it happens.
You're going to see some serious shit, Marty.
I found 3 games that feature the DeLorean. There was Forza Horizon 5, The Crew 2, and Legendary DeLorean Future Race.
I found it, right?
Third one for sure.
That sounds great. I am intrigued by the title alone.
Better game of the century, calling it now.
Oh.
It says it's a car simulator app that offers a realistic driving experience in the DeLorean DMC-12. The game includes features like police pursuit mode, City parking missions and multiple camera angles.
City parking, oh boy.
You gotta
Parallel
parallel
park
park
your
this.
DeLorean.
I
How
love
are you-
And make sure you can open your doors still.
I love the
How are you going to handle hills?
well, I like police pursuit mode when you can top out at 88 miles an hour.
When you go back in time.
Oh, so speaking of a movie tie-in, one of the ones because I went back and I actually have the NES game for this, was Die Hard back in the day. Die Hard is a hard game to play for the NES because they wanted to introduce a bunch of stealth mechanics, but apparently did not listen to anybody who worked on Metal Gear that happened the year earlier. And so, like, the concept of it's interesting because just like in the movie for Die Hard, there's only 30 enemies in the entire game.
I'm gonna go and watch that. I'm gonna count them.
So if you go with it, but you had to be stealthy, work your way around. You had a constant fog of war that will always adjust itself. And if you're mishandle things, you can just get glass placed on the ground and you'll cut yourself real bad.
Interesting.
Okay.
I feel like, especially in this era, the innovation was often undercut by difficulty.
Mhm.
And like it's so much, it's like, oh, this is a good idea if it was only like 50% less hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, if only I didn't throw my controller through my television, then maybe I would still play this game.
Little things.
But yeah, no, the concept of that is interesting. Imagine if you would just, as a concept for that, if you decided to go through and take out every enemy, which you have to stealth around that is an option. And your biggest enemy in that is every time that you lose or travel from floor to floor, because they're all over the place, you lose time. And you have to rescue all the hostages and take out all the guards before, I think, 30 minutes in the game. And so every time you could use the elevator to get from place to place, it's faster. But now all the enemies know where you are. Or you can use the stairs, which is slower, but it'll take minutes to get through the stairs. And still, you have to stealth your way, which is not a fast option.
It sounds like a game that's ripe for a speed run.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not the one who's going to do that speed run. I
Yeah.
couldn't beat the game. I couldn't
Somebody
beat the
should.
first floor.
It's gonna be like a 5-minute speed run. The game
Yeah,
that's-
yeah. I mean, if the whole game's only 30 minutes, it sounds just like very arcadey too. Like it doesn't, it sounds like something that's very much adapted from arcade areas or eras, and just like, yeah, to just have such a kind of short time frame. It's interesting.
Well, I mean, a lot of games were kind of like that early for consoles. Look at the first Mega Man. They've got a scoring system at the top, like you gain points. It's like that's
I mean, that's like that, and that persisted for a long time. I mean, through Super Nintendo, I would say through even the next generation, where it's just like why do I have points? It's
yeah,
like,
like
why do I
score
care?
doesn't matter. I finish
Yeah.
the game, I win.
I'm Mega Man the best of all my friends. Here's the proof.
I got 5 more points.
I think that was like the one thing, right? You could like submit your scores to magazines. Like, here,
Mhm.
Nintendo Power, look how good my Mega Man score is.
I was gonna make a Billy Mitchell joke, but I'll refrain.
I was playing through Mega Man 1. It's actually heart-wrenching when you're hurt and you're like, oh, I can go get these extra, if I fight these enemies, I can get some extra health. Nope, here's some points for you. Go fight the boss with points.
God,
Oh,
that would be
except
great
points?
though as a mechanic. Imagine that, all the way up to that point, all the points you've accumulated mattered. Like that is just fuel for your weapon. So like it ticks down as you're shooting at the enemy. And then when you stop, it stays. And like if you can defeat him with fewest misses, you get to keep those points. That sounds like an indie darling.
You say
Thinking
great.
thoughts.
I think I'm gonna be on the first boss with no points. I think that's how that's gonna go, to be honest.
So would it be?
It just sounds like ammo.
Yeah,
Mm,
Yeah.
True.
you put in ammo with extra steps.
Yeah, every enemy you kill, you just take their leftover mags and say, all right, this is mine now, let's go.
So do you have a melee weapon that you kill small time enemies with so you can get points?
Sure.
Because how do you kill something with no points? If points
We're
are
workshopping a
given?
game right now, guys. Let's go.
All right, this is a game jam.
GTP the game coming soon.
GTP
Anyway.
doesn't stand for Gaming Theater Presents. It stands for Get Them Points.
Oh no,
Always has.
Leo's getting ideas.
Always has been.
Okay.
Oh man.
Anyway,
Anyway,
one thing that I always think is interesting is the idea that, gamers don't really know what they want, right? So as we mentioned before already, that there will come a game that comes out where the system is great or there's something to be loved about it, right? Silent Hill was mentioned before. Silent Hill 4 has kind of come into its own as like, maybe copium, but also like one of the darlings of the series, right?
Mhm.
It is very funny to me that, a lot of the times it seems like, we gamers don't really know what we want. We think we do, but we don't really have the best ideas. One of the things that I remember from my youth was when Final Fantasy switched from the turn-based combat to the ATB gauge. It was a huge thing. A lot of the old Final Fantasy heads were like, it ruins Final Fantasy. It's ruined forever. This is terrible. And then a few years after that, when ATB went away for the next iteration, it was the same thing, but it was the people who liked ATB being like, oh no, now Final Fantasy is ruined.
What was the first one to do ATB?
I think
4, I
7?
think.
What was
No,
it?
4.
Everyone said
4.
something different.
47, 8, 52, 13, I don't know.
4 doesn't have the ATB system.
I thought
Yeah, it
7
does.
was
Hold
the
on.
one that introduced it.
Nope, 4.
6 definitely has it.
6
Yeah.
has it because Chrono Trigger has, and that comes after that.
4
Yeah, but nobody
introduced it.
gave Chrono
4.
Trigger any problems for it.
Because Chrono
Well,
Trigger's
yeah,
not a
you can
Final
also
Fantasy.
see the
It's
enemy.
different, right? It's not Final Fantasy, so they're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is fine. It's something different.
Akira Toriyama can do no wrong.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was like one of the few things people complained about with 4.
4
Um,
had the
Wait.
ATB. 4 introduced the
What
ATB
was-
gauge.
Oh.
Wait, but what was 4 in? We didn't get 4 in the US.
We
though,
got
did
2.
It was 2.
It was 4,
It was
but
2,
we got it
okay.
as 2.
we? Okay.
Our
And then
2.
6 was 3. Okay.
Yes.
So it makes sense that we would say different numbers at the same time.
They're all
No,
No, I
right.
don't think anyone said 2. So.
That's true. You know what?
Leo,
That's
fix
fair.
it in post.
Oh boy. Okay, everybody say 4 right now, and then Leo just put it in post.
Okay. 2.
1, 2, 3. I'm just gonna count
7.
2.
4. Getting closer
Yeah.
every time.
I do find it very interesting, right? Because I think that a lot of people would say that the ATB gauge was a good step up, but at the time, because it was different in its own way, it was seen as being, divisive and not very well received initially. Even though 4 is a great game, or 2, or whatever we want to call it, is a fantastic
Cecil and
game.
Kane the game.
Yeah, pretty much, right? And then I know when the jump to 3D happened with 7, a lot of people were like, oh, well, 6 is way better. And 6 is great. Don't get me wrong. 6 is an amazing game. 7's also an amazing game. They're both amazing games, but they are pitted against each other because they are so close and because there are differences and changes. So I do find that very interesting. And Final Fantasy is not the only time that we see this happen, right? Castlevania was mentioned earlier. Zelda 2 was mentioned earlier, where like these game studios make changes, and it does kind of feel like nerds in general, like, we want something different, and then they make something different. It's like, oh, but not like that. That's not
Yeah.
that's
Gamers
not what
don't
we
know what they
wanted.
want.
No,
Also
we
different,
don't.
But also not.
Yeah, could you do something different? Oh, it's just not that way.
Not that different.
Getting
Different
closer
how
every
I
time.
want it. Well, and then like sort of in that same vein with Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, you have people who love it, and then you have people who are like, no, this is way too. Yeah, I love it. I think Rebirth is also better than Remake, but like, like there's a lot of people who are like, this is not how I wanted it. I wanted a 1-for-1 remake with modern graphics, and it's like, well, you were never gonna get that.
That's an
Like-
unrealistic want.
As
Yeah.
someone who's
Yeah.
bought that game double digits, like 13, 14, 15 times,
Yeah.
I don't even want that.
Correct.
Like I
Like
love
Dane,
that
you're
game.
looking over at me on my screen because it's like, yeah, we're
I love that game. I love that game so much. It's one of my absolute favorite games. But I don't want to like the same game that I've already played with just new graphics. That doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, that's a whole debate on remakes and remasters right there. But yeah, and I think just one of the main things when it comes to that is like, as long as the original's available, right? Like Final Fantasy VII, you can get on anything. So let the remake be different.
Yeah, and there's some really beautiful remasters of the original, like fan remasters that like are stunning. And so like, yeah, just let it live. Let the remake live its own life, and let the original have its own life.
the remakes do not take away anything from the original, and that's something I think a lot of people need to remember is we still have that. There's nothing preventing us from going to that. This is a way of introducing these characters that we grew up loving to a very different audience.
The only difference, but like this is a different podcast entirely. But
I know we're getting
if,
into the remake podcast.
I'm gonna have to make a list.
if the original is no longer accessible in
Yeah.
like easily accessible, like you can't go get it from the PlayStation Network, or you can't get it from the Nintendo eShop or something like that, or on Steam, then it's a little bit, well, and even GOG, or they have a lot of games like that. But once something becomes inaccessible, like where's my Lufia and Lufia 2 ports? Come on.
Dragoon,
then
anyone?
then that's gonna be a thing where, like, if the remake came out and it was super vastly different to the point where it's almost like, I don't know, too different, then I might be like, can we get ports of the originals at least?
So it's like we're going from Devil May Cry 3, or I guess 4 in that case, to DMC Devil May Cry in terms of design element.
Yeah.
People are like, nope, not mine. Get that away.
Yeah.
Even though it's
And
a
that's-
totally respectable game.
And it's
Has
fun.
opinion changed on that one? I'm not
Yes.
super familiar with Devil May Cry, but do people?
People have come around, especially after they did the definitive edition, which upped the frame rate, which was a big complaint that it was locked at 30 on consoles. And then they tightened up a couple of other elements, but I played vanilla and it was totally a fine game. I just disagreed with their decisions on changes to Dante's design.
Yeah, one thing I was gonna bring up is that, like, art style can be a big one. When Wind Waker was first announced,
Yeah.
the backlash to that was insane. Like, I think I was in like middle school, I think, and I just remember, like, we were all like laughing at it. We're like, what is this? Why is it so? This isn't Zelda. Like, this doesn't look anything like Ocarina of Time. This doesn't look like Link. This is just some weird cartoon thing. And shortly after it came out, it became beloved. Everyone played it, and we were like, oh, this is incredible. And now the art style, I mean, one of the great things about that game is its art style has held up. It's
Yeah.
one of the greatest looking GameCube games, and it continues to look beautiful because of the cel shaded.
Yeah.
But it is just that it's changes. People are just like, it just freaks people out real bad.
One I've often found too that sometimes, playing a remake or a remaster does make me want to go back and replay the original. Not to bring up a divisive topic on a divisive podcast, but I just recently played through on my channel Lollipop Chainsaw Repop.
Ooh,
And that was
yes.
that was a fun experience. I did enjoy it, but there was a part of me, like, with some of the changes that had to be made due to a lot of extenuating circumstances. There was a part of it that was like, yeah, this was good, and like it did scratch that itch and then bring back that fondness for the game. But I do kind of want to go back and like play the original as it was released, as it was. I don't want to say intended. That's kind of a loaded term, but it did make me want to like go back and play the original, because I did miss some of the hallmarks of it that weren't available in the remake.
I mean, licensed music was a big
Yeah.
part of that one, and
Yeah.
I mean, just booting it up and getting
Yeah.
Cherry Bomb and like things like that.
Mhm.
It's just
Oh, yeah.
like it's like you like that's the main thing I remember from playing is that you just like hear that guitar riff and the drums right when you open it up, and you're like, oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
it's
so
so
good.
But I love that soundtrack.
Yeah, like, how
Was-
would you not? It's incredible.
Was there like a bunch taken out? I haven't played the repop yet. I've still only experienced the original back when. Was there a lot of music that had to be replaced, or were we able to get all those licenses back?
So I gotta just say this off the top of hand. We didn't do the remaster. That was
Right.
handled by Don Gami. I don't know. We literally had nothing to do with it,
Yeah.
so I don't
Gotcha.
know. They didn't have any of the licensed music as far as I'm aware, though.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, no, I don't believe they could get the license. I know that James Gunn wasn't involved
he had
this
zero say
time.
on that.
Yes,
I don't believe Suda
it
was
was
involved,
it was
yeah.
all just handled by the because I think it was originally published by Kadokawa,
Mhm.
Yeah,
and I think
that
they were the
sounds
ones
right.
with the license, and I guess they're also part of whatever this other company is.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so that was one thing though when we did Shadows of the Damned is it's a straight up remaster. It's the same music, it's the same vocal tracks. It's just upscaled graphics, upscaled frame rate. For better or worse, because it is a game written in 2011, so it's just prevalent at times, and some of the humor can be a little bit like it's like all right, yeah, I get it, but
Mhm.
Mhm,
um,
mhm.
but it's that preservation thing too, where it's like, well, when you're remastering something, how much of it do you want to change for to suit a more modern audience?
Yeah. No, like I mentioned before, I definitely agree. Shadows of the Damned felt like a more complete game than Repop did.
Mhm.
The remaster, like it's just, I don't want to say it was done better because I'm not trying to start fights here on the internet, but like you could tell there was care and a very precise brush was used to paint the remaster in
Yeah.
one more than the other.
And I
I'll
think,
say.
and like part of that is, obviously licensed music is very expensive, and so
Yeah.
having to regain those licenses can be incredibly difficult. And we're kind of lucky with Shadows of the Dam because EA kind of let us have it. Like it wasn't, they were like, we don't really
As they should.
so we kind of, we had the soundtrack, we didn't have to, reclaim any of this. We had the whole game as a whole. The hardest thing is obviously just taking something that was on PS3, which is notoriously difficult to port. But we didn't have to struggle with any of those extra rights issues.
Come on. But you can play your Bloodborne on the PS5, so.
Bloodborne any day now.
Oh my God, you hush. But kind of segueing
I'm waiting for that remaster.
Segueing a little bit with MGS4 to more Kojima, Death Stranding, very divisive at launch for very strange reasons.
I feel like I understand the reasons, if only because like it's such a different kind of game.
Exactly.
I was immediately infatuated with it. It was a very like weirdly cathartic experience, just being able to walk this whole landscape and there's no one around, which is my dream.
Leave me alone.
And just the music playing and everybody's like, oh, it's just a walking simulator, and like I totally get it. I know people who played it for maybe 3-4 hours and were like, I'm bored, and I'm like, I get it. Especially like the game took me like 85 or 90 hours to finish, but I was so immediately infatuated with it that I didn't mind going through like the walking segments. And then like I loved it. It was like a puzzle. Like, where do I go? What do I use to get from point A to point B? And I loved it. But like my sister's boyfriend got bored with it after a few hours, and I was like, I get it. Like, it's definitely not for everyone.
Too can also just be timing. Like sometimes a game can just like hit you at the right time, and it's just like, this is exactly what I wanted to play right now.
Yeah.
And as someone who's like a new Metal Gear fan who only got into it a few years ago, and then I played through all those, and then I played through Death Stranding, and I had like coming into Death Stranding, it'd been like 4 years after it came out maybe, and I was like, I don't quite understand what the opinion on what people's opinion on this is, because it's like, and when the Death Stranding 2 trailer came out, I'm like, people are really excited for this, even though I don't think many people like the first game. And it's like, oh, it seems like it's sold really well, but most people only played a couple hours of it, if that. And so it's just like, it's in a really weird position. And I loved it because coming off of MGS-V, which I wasn't a huge fan of personally. I had a lot of issues with it, and I was kind of disillusioned by Kojima's whole like celebrity thing, and like going into Death Stranding, I'm like, oh, it's just like all these celebrities, right? He just wants to put all his little celebrity friends in this game.
It's his version of shoutouts.
Yeah. And so I was kind of going into it with pretty low expectations, and I ended up really enjoying it too. It was very satisfying. It was beautiful. And the progression, I think, was really satisfying as well. Just getting upgrades and getting vehicles and being, then getting like little little hook things that could slide you back and forth. And
oh yeah.
And so I found it really enjoyable. But the thing about it is that I did not have any interest in the story. It was like full gameplay for me, which is really unusual for me, because I'm usually like, story's what's going to hook me in a game. But for Death Stranding, it was all just the gameplay was satisfying for me.
Oh, I loved the story, but it was one where for the first half of it, I was like, I don't understand a word of this. But then when it all like wrapped up at the end, I was like, oh, I'm emotional about it. But I like it. The gameplay also was, like I said, it was very cathartic and very just like, it was nice to just immerse myself in something that felt peaceful, even though there were monsters and stuff.
Yeah, well, and I think my issue with Kojima's more recent games is that he's gone really into non-linear games, and his plots are so convoluted that even when they are linear, they're still kind of hard to understand. But even like Peace Walker is one of my favorite Metal Gear games, but I still think it really suffers from having a non-linear plot, from having the main missions and having the side missions and going back and forth, and then you're kind of like forgetting the plot. And I think MGS5 struggled with that, and I think Death Stranding struggled with that too, where it's just like, and also Death Stranding kind of expected you to like read a lot, which it's one of those things where it's like, I bet if I took the time and I really got into this, I'd find it really fascinating. And I think it's neat how much effort was put into this very convoluted, interesting, complicated plot. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm playing a game. I don't want to read emails every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'd be lying if I said I didn't just open and close them just to make the blip go away.
Just the notification go away. Yeah.
There were a lot where I did the same thing. I would read ones that looked really important, but sometimes I'm like, oh my God, there's so many. In sort of an opposite vein, it's like the transition from Final Fantasy 13 to 13-2. 13, they really expected you to do a lot of reading, and I think I had to play the game twice for me to and I loved it the first time. Like I'm in the minority that really enjoyed 13, but like you did have to read a lot to understand it, and it was a little bit alienating. And I think I played it a second time and then was like, oh, I get it. I'm understanding better. And then I was at San Diego Comic-Con, and they had the demo for 13-2. And I was talking, it was about a 30-minute demo, and I was chatting with the dude at the head of the line, and he was saying that they actually tried to negate that because people got so tired of reading to understand the plot. But then when I played 13-2, like the demo was super fun, and then when I got my hands on the game, it was like the opposite problem where they over-explained everything. And so you would do this whole plot, you'd get all of this story, and then suddenly Noel and Sarah would have a conversation about everything that just happened. They're like, wow, and then this happened, and then this happened. I was like, I was there.
You don't need to hold my hand that much. I mean,
Is this an episode of
I've been
Dora the
there. I
Explorer?
saw it.
pretty much, right? And to Liz's point, right? If anyone can explain to me who Barthandelus is, like, really?
I can tell you his name is Barthandelus.
I can too, because Lightning says it 47 times in the final boss fight, which is hilarious. But like, I love 13. I agree. But like, he's Space Pope. Like, that's kind of like the best I got. Like, he's some guy who's not great. But
I haven't played this game, so I'm getting a very interesting idea of what it's about.
Yeah, like
And now it's just if someone's gonna be like 13, I'm gonna be like Space Pope.
yeah, that's good.
But he's not great at it.
Space Pope
Is that the one, Space Pope?
starts with a B, right? Yeah, totally.
It's a really, that's like interesting. It's really fun, but you can definitely tell why people would have a negative opinion of 13.
Well,
but
like to bounce off Maddie's point, right? Like linear games, 13 was very linear for the 60% of it.
Mhm.
And then even when it finally does open, most people have quit by that point. And they didn't want a linear Final Fantasy game in that way. They wanted it to be more open world, get on the high wind, get on your chocobo, go explore. That's kind of what we had come to expect. And so the fact that this was a switch to linear really did kind of make it divisive for a lot of people. I absolutely agree. To circle back really quickly to Death Stranding, I had kind of an interesting, what I find interesting reaction to it. It was the marketing that drove me away from it, to be honest.
Mhm.
I saw, and like, no hate to this actor, he's great, but I saw naked Norman Reedus so many times, followed immediately by creepy baby, and I was just like, I need to stop looking at this. It was everywhere for me. And then when I did pick it up eventually, I was like, I was a little bit bored, admittedly. I've never finished it. It's something I'm trying to better myself. I'm trying
The
to
backlog
better.
is massive always.
if it's not your thing, also like it's just
like I want to like it. That's the thing.
Yeah. Oh, I've had that with games before too,
Yeah.
where it's just like you're just like, why am I not enjoying this? Especially if it's like something that feels like I had this with the first Kingdom Hearts, where I was like, I should love this, and I remember seeing the trailers and like they just like. It's like beautiful and it's like everything. I'm not even a big Disney person, but it was still like exciting and like the mashing of the two. And I'm like, this should be something I enjoy, and I absolutely despise that game. That is one of the few. That's like one of the few games that I'm just like, I don't like this game, and
We're
it's
the
the
lore.
reason I played Metal Gear, because I was gonna go through the whole Kingdom Hearts series, and I played the first one, and I was like, no.
Look, I'm just gonna say this. That's a win in my book. If you had to pick between the two, I think you picked the proper path. But this is just me.
Only because of we know how 3 happens. Okay, Brandon.
Like
Kingdom
Kingdom
Hearts
Hearts
3.
3.
Oh, see, I'm gonna be the one that says I love Kingdom Hearts. It's like a comfort series for me,
Sure.
but I am also the insane person that knows the entire lore and like played the mobile game, knows the mobile game lore.
Well,
I played. Whew, it's a lot.
And I'm really happy too when people like games that I don't. It's one of those things where it's like I don't want to say it's a bad game. It's just a game that does not appeal to me.
And that's okay.
And whenever anyone like loves a game that I don't, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like I want to understand why you like this, because for some reason it just doesn't work for me, but I'm glad it works for other people.
So I will note on that, the original working title for this podcast outline was Bad Games with Good Ideas. So I was like, we should probably reword this a bit.
You don't want to
yeah,
flame
they're
war?
not bad games.
But sometimes that's the king. It's like if it's a style of a game that you for some reason can't click with, you just can't click with it. I know for Terraria should be right up my alley. You can build everything that you need to. It's 8-bit. There's bosses that you can fight, and I was so bored, and I could not do anything with that. And again did that same thing with Minecraft. Everyone in the world loved it. I could not. I was just tired for it, and then I did the same thing with Valheim, which another builder game. And
Did you play the shit out of Valheim?
Yes and no. So here's what happened: was I played through Valheim, and I got my friends to build me a house because I didn't want to.
Sandbox games are hard for me as well in that regard, where I need an idea of what I need to do. If you're like,
that's why I like Dragon Quest builders, because it's like it's not totally freeform. It's like you need all these things to build this thing, and here's your blueprint, and here's everything you need to do, and it's like, okay, I know what I have to do. I'm not like creative enough to be like I can design my own. I think that was, even though, and this, I'm gonna say this about the newest Animal Crossing, even though I put like 300 hours into it, but the amount of freedom was like too much, where it's like you don't have to plan around your island anymore, because you can just mow over everything, and you don't have to worry about cliffs, you don't have to worry about villagers plunking their house down on your flower patch. And it's just like there's a point where it's like when I get too much freedom, I just like shut down.
Yeah,
like you need some form of structure, regardless of how small it is.
A
little will go a long way in some cases.
Like, let me build a house for Leo or whatever, just as an example, but give me like, hey, go fight this person eventually. Like you need to prepare for this, or here's your goal. Here's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Whatever MacGuffin you might need to use.
Yeah,
like, just give me something.
Like I got stuck with those things. Like thinking it wasn't on. It should have been my bag, because the other types of games I like a lot is city builders, SimCity, Roller Coaster Tycoon,
probably Civilization.
That's not a city builder, but I do love Civilization.
You did build cities in Civ.
Caesar and various other ones too. Dungeon Keeper.
What were you gonna say, Liz?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say I put. Sorry, I have to get my train of thought back because I went back to Animal Crossing, which was too far back.
Sure.
No, there's a game I backed on Kickstarter that called Runa, and it's coming out in a couple of years. Like, it was very early development, but to your point, it has a lot of like, it's gonna have farm sim elements, but it's primarily a JRPG based off of Final Fantasy X, Persona 5, and I don't remember what its other inspiration is, but it is like, hey, here, build these things, do these things, here's the JRPG plot, but here you can go fish and you can do farming things and you can do these things. And it felt like the perfect blend of tell me what to do mixed in with just enough freedom. But I also have put 1,200 hours into New Horizons. have renovated my island probably 49 times.
Look,
My
I'm
wife has
happy.
restarted that so many times. I think she was
I
at
don't
like,
restart it.
well, no, she did because there was something left. Like 3,000 hours because it came out right when COVID was striking,
Right.
and she got laid off because at the time she was managing a movie theater. Guess what? Movies are
Oh.
non-essential. So what did she have? Nothing but time. What came out? Animal Crossing
Doom.
Yes,
and Doom.
I went
But
with Doom.
I am happy to harvest turnips as long as I can go fight God at the end. That's what I need.
Well, every JRPG with a farming element has
Yeah.
got your back.
But I guess too, Dragon Quest Builders, circling all the way back to that. I mean, to an extent, is divisive and innovative because it's a spin-off, so people didn't look at it as harshly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the thing. It's like when it's a mainline game that does something very different, that's when people are like, what is this? And I think that's happened. It's weird. I don't know if other people see this, but I feel like with Final Fantasy, I have the first 10 are very segmented for me. And I don't know if that's just because of like my generation or something. And then it's like all the ones after that are kind of like weird. And it's like, because that's when they did 11, and they did something weird for 12, and then 13, and then 14. Like 11 and 14 are the line ones, and then 15 was like the road trip, and then 16 was. And so it's like, it feels like after 10, they really started experimenting a lot more.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I think post 10, nothing has had the same kind of level of like critical acclaim, or at least like the consensus. And maybe that's more about just the gaming community as a whole, but it's just like kind of interesting.
I think you get after 10 especially, although you do also see it with 7, 8, and 10. But a lot with like 12, the 13 trilogy, 15, and 16. You get a lot of people who either love it or hate it, and very few people that are indifferent. Like 12 was critically, it got a 50 out of 50 or 40 out of 40 on Famitsu, which is like one of the rare perfect scores, but a lot of people didn't like 12 because they thought it was too similar to
Star Wars.
Well, and also the battle system was too much like 11.
It was like the MMO style.
Yeah, and then 13 was like a differentiation from all of it, where it was trying to blend all of it. And then 15, you have something that was cooking for so long. I don't like 15, but Dane loves 15.
I also am not a big fan of 15.
I cried. I cried at the ending scene. Full disclosure.
I thought it was
100%.
I hated it.
There's a scene they're sitting around a campfire and they're talking about stuff at the very, very end of the game, and I was bawling like a child at the very end.
Yeah,
of
I
that
was
game.
so
It hit
bored
me
with
right
every
where I
character.
live.
They killed the one character that I gave a shit about. But then 16 came out, and like I love 16. To me, it was one of the best Final Fantasies since 10. But then there's a lot of people who say it's too Devil May Cry, which makes sense. The combat director from Devil May Cry worked on it. You know, some people think it's not Final Fantasy enough or what have you. And so you definitely do get a lot of divisiveness with fans depending on just what is the game doing. But you also see that with like 8. People hate 8. I love 8. And I can see why people hate it. There's one of the plot twists, and 8 is so bad, and I'm like, I get it.
You want a convoluted plot?
Me, I've never gotten into 8, but it was when I heard someone talk about the way the magic system works, and like the way you increase, like the way you level it up, and it takes like something. I was just like, I'm like, oh, this sounds like something that's gonna really not go with me.
It can be so tedious, but Final Fantasy VIII was where I really learned to love level grinding, and now I am the type where I will just turn the volume down, I will turn on a podcast or music or whatever, and I will level grind all day long. It's one of my favorite things. But you know, a lot of people didn't like 8, not just because of the plot twist, but they felt it was too similar to 7. Like, why would we want to play that when we could just play 7? It had like kind of the steampunk aesthetic, and you know, Squall and Cloud are superficially similar in ways. But then
Superficial, Dane. Superficial. Also,
They're
Superficial.
moody, pretty boys. Come on.
I
They're
mean-
both
Yeah, I'm
gacked.
saying,
But they're
listen,
Everyone in that era was gacked.
everyone
Every
is
single
gacked.
character.
you are not wrong.
which is awesome when you consider Dirge of Cerberus, where he's in it. You know, like,
Yeah.
yeah, Jack is
Like, just
actually
shove him into
Genesis.
every possible thing. Put him in
That's-
the Metal Gear Solid 2 commercials. Just
that's true.
jam him into everything you can possibly in the early 2000s.
Well, and I think
But-
he also did like music videos for like I think Gundam Seed.
Oh, he's
Jack
just,
is
there was, and then there
everywhere.
was
He's
an
in
actual
everything.
game on 360, I think, that was actually gacked.
I forgot about
I
that.
forget
You're
what it was
right.
called. Let's look it up real quick. But
What is he doing these days?
he's being an immortal vampire. Like,
Yes,
that's
that
He
sounds
is.
like
this
him.
Hidden guy. Like, no
Him
one
and
remembers that.
Keanu Reeves are just vampires.
Yeah, but he actually, like, Gact is actually like, no, I'm 500 years old, and everyone's just like, yeah.
Sure.
Like, they're just like, they all just accept it. They're like, yeah.
Do you think it's
Yeah,
awkward at
And
the
he's
vampire
like never
meetings?
like gone against it either. He's just like, that's what his story, and he sticks with it. So everyone's like, all right.
I
just
want
have
that number to be
wonder,
different every single time.
Each year goes up by one.
No, each year it just jumps. It's like it could be 500 this year. It can be 482 next year. It can be 795 2 years from now. I don't care. Just like keep it going.
At one
Assuming-
year, he cuts it in half, and it's less than that.
Yeah, it's like what?
Presuming he's actually a vampire, I imagine the vampire meetings have to be real awkward. Like, hey man, could you stop? Like,
You're giving us all away.
you're saying the quiet part out loud, and he's like, "That's just who I am." Sorry. No, I am notably a detractor of 8. It did not hit me the way 7 or 9 did. Honestly, I love Final Fantasy 9 with all of my heart, but
Mine was the first Final Fantasy I ever beat all on my own.
9.
I
Oh,
was
it's so
14,
good.
and my brother was finally leaving me alone enough to let me play games on my own.
That was kind of another one that was a little bit divisive, I think, in that the art
Art-
style kind of
Yeah, the
similar to
art
Wind
style.
Waker.
Art style definitely that can be really divisive. But again, it's very beloved now. But it does feel like it sticks out, right? You look kind of at all, even like you kind of have like the pixel art ones, but then all the like 7 through 10, 9. It has a unique art style. I think it's similar to like did it have the same art director as like the Tactics games or something? There's something
Yes.
similar in that it's like it's not like the full size human. It's like it's not chibi,
It's
but it's
SD.
like kind
Yeah,
of like this in the middle,
shrunk a
like
little bit.
Yeah.
it's like just kind of like cuter. They have just like
Mhm.
slightly different proportions,
You would
Yeah.
almost call it super deformed, but not quite.
Yeah.
It's like
slightly
this.
deformed.
Yeah, slightly deformed. Yeah, they're
I like that,
Nendroids.
yeah.
That's what they are.
They're
Yeah,
Nendroids.
that's fair. But no, like I
Um,
mean, 8
oh,
I
sorry.
give a lot of shit to, but
I mean, 8.
it's a fine
somebody who
game. It has
loves
good parts
8,
to it, but I'm not. That ain't-
Yeah, as someone who loves 8, it does have a lot of things that aren't going for it, and the music the music is one of the best parts.
Yes.
The magic system
Drawing.
is kind of like but I also give it a lot of grace. I think that the main plot point I could tear apart because of the whole amnesia plot and how you don't actually have to use GFs, and how frequently were they even using them before, when the whole of Garden had 2 GFs total and Quistis had them both.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I could go off. I love 8 though.
Sure.
But then 10 was also, people hated Titus because everybody wanted somebody that was like people wanted Cloud, and then they gave them Squall, and again, it's very superficial. They both come off as very moody, but they're not. Cloud is actually a sassy little dude. But then they were like, okay, well, then you want somebody different, so they give you Zidane, who's a little bit more of like a little bit of a player in ways. And then they were like, okay, well, people really responded to him. Now we're going to give Sunshine Boy Titus. And people hated Titus. And I'm like, dude, no one can be happy. I also love 10 a lot.
My issue with main characters in that regard is that like Titus was fine. I like Titus well enough, but then Vaughn and
Well, Vaughn was a last minute addition because they thought that they needed a pretty boy to
a
sell.
blonde-haired protagonist to pair with
Wait,
their
how is
dark-haired
how is
heroine.
the protagonist the last minute addition?
He is
So-
very unimportant to the total plot.
Initially,
I wish I was kidding.
There was a soldier character named Bosch who was going to be the protagonist, but he's an older man. By older, I mean he's in his 30s.
He's 35. He's over the hill.
How
It's the
dare
Sid
you.
Highwind thing. It's like
Yeah.
32.
Oof,
A grizzled
yeah.
old pilot.
Old
He's
man.
32.
During Extra Life's game day yesterday, we were going through the ages of Final Fantasy VII characters, and yeah, Sephiroth's 21, I think, and he either 6'1" or
He's
6'7".
just a child. Why
He's
are
a
we being so
baby.
mean to Sephiroth? He's just
Well, I mean,
a baby.
He did murder a whole town. Like
Yeah,
he
don't try him as an adult. He's just a little baby.
yeah, and
He doesn't
and
know
like
what he was doing.
Red 13's 52, but he's like 14 in dog years. It's very odd.
Yeah.
The ages in media is funny.
Yeah, but so Bosch was the initial, and you can kind of tell when you play the game that the story is very much his and Ash's, and then Balthier was obviously like a character that was supposed to be there, but like all these characters are a little bit more mature and a little bit older, and Bosch is 35, and they were like, well, we don't think that he'll resonate with gamers, so then last minute they were like, okay, let's make this guy and his friend, and they're both 18 and they are orphans from this war that happened, and now we follow them around, and they're the ones who introduce you to the game, and he is kind of boring as someone who loves 12. He is kind of a boring character. Like Penella was way more interesting, and she's his bestie who was also added in last minute, but he was even more last minute than she was. And
kind of crazy that gamers don't reach 35.
Hey,
I died 3 years ago.
There was a really interesting interview with Tetsuya Nomura recently where he was talking about, when he made Final Fantasy VII, the original, he was in his early 20s, and he made Sid Highwind, who's 32, and he's like, when I was that age, that seemed old to me. And now, he's in his 50s, and he's doing the remake, and he was like, he's like, now I realize I'm still doing so much at this age, and it's like that 30 is just like a child now, and it's and so it's like he's kind of gone back to look at that and be like, wow, I've definitely grown a lot.
So he opens up the manual, sees that age point, he's like, oh, I was a dick.
Sid had a hard couple of years if he's looking that way at 35.
He's 32.
Oh, 32. Sorry. He's had some
I
hard
feel
things.
I think in the remake they make him look a little younger or a little more his age.
They make him look very pretty. They gave him the brightest blue eyes, the most beautiful lashes. I don't know.
They knew what they were doing.
They did, and they were like, "This man is a good 32."
They
know
that
32.
They know that girls like the older men now. They're
not
all right.
40 packs a day,
That's why Devil May Cry 5 Dante has really got it going, because the older man is.
It's amazing that Johnny Young Bosch played him for forever.
Yes.
Not just in the anime.
Yeah, crazy. Anyway, not to start shit,
but yeah,
so Devil May Cry fandom.
Anyway, all the games were really, the Final Fantasy games have been really divisive, at least the mainline ones. And I love that Lightning also got such a bad rap, even though she was based off of Cloud.
Well,
was she the first female? Well, no. The first female 3D for the 3D games.
Yeah, because before that, you always had the balance between male and female characters that you could generally switch between.
Yeah, playing. Up through 6, kind of.
Mm-hmm. And then and so then with even with 7, you play mostly you play as Cloud, but you can switch your party members out as once. Well, after spoiler alert, after Cloud dies the first time, he gets locked into the live stream, and you can't play him for a while, and then after that, your party is able to freely change, and then. After that, it's Squall, and then Zane, and then Titus, and you can swap party members, but they're not the focus. And then she's the first female protagonist, and she was modeled after Cloud, and she was supposed to be kind of an homage to him, and then people were like, I hate her. But people hate women anyway. So.
It did. I mean, that's true. That's going to happen regardless. Unfortunately, it did kind of feel like they mixed Cloud and Squall, and
then gender bent it.
This is the character you wanted, and I was down for it. But yeah, a lot of people were.
I love her.
Nah. It's honestly probably the best part of 13 is
Snowbillies.
Some of their character designs are just insanely good.
They're really good.
Some of them are also really bad.
Yes.
Some really
all of Hope.
I love Hope.
Oh, why?
He's out.
No, his design is fine. His character is garbage.
It can be both, Brandon. It can be both.
I really like him as a character. He's better in 13 too.
I was looking because I haven't played 13, so I was like looking him up, and the first thing is like a Reddit that says, "Do people really still hate Hope this much?"
The answer is yes.
Yep.
Like, unironically, his mother redeems his character, which is crazy.
He's like, everybody calls him like just a whiny child, and he's like 14.
He's a
Is
child.
he the equivalent of who's the kid in the Rebirth in the FF7 remake?
Chadley.
Yeah, is he like the Chadley
Chadley-
of 13?
Hope
Yeah.
walked so Chadley could run. 100%.
But I love Chadley. Mai annoys the shit out of me in Rebirth, but I still think she's also super cute, and I
Mai's
think
great.
that she and Chadley have like the funnest like AI sibling relationship. But Hope, he was like 14, went on vacation with his mom. He was supposed to go with both his parents, but his dad's a
So
workaholic.
middle-aged.
He has
Yeah.
middle age. he has no relationship with his dad. He doesn't, but his mom is just like, oh, I love him, even though neither of them get to see him very often. And then he goes on vacation, supposed to be with both parents, ends up going with just his mom when all hell breaks loose and they're like going to be purged from their like moon and sent down to the planet where monsters live, and he watches his mom die, and like she sacrifices herself to save others, but from what he can tell, it's from a distance. He thinks that somebody killed her, somebody that's in your party killed her, and he is very spineless. He doesn't know how to confront this adult that he thinks killed his mother, and he doesn't. So he just he's angry and he's mopey. And I'm like, dude, if that happened to me and I was 14, I'd also be an angry, mopey child.
It's definitely
I-
understandable.
I feel
But
like there's a lot of child characters where people just hate them because they're children.
I
But-
mean, yeah, that's fair.
He does get better in 13 too, because you actually meet him when he's an adult, and that because that one's time traveling, and
He
then
grows
he
up.
goes, and
Yeah,
then in
weird.
13, in Lightning Returns, he's also a lot better.
I mean, look,
It's
okay,
just-
there's this
anyway.
thing called
I
a
just
falsy
realized
and
that
a
13-2 and Lightning Returns are different games.
Oh yeah, there's
Yeah.
3 in the
Oh.
13 series.
I love. There was one that was like, there was a comic somebody made that said Lightning Returns, and it's like Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13 is the actual title, and so somebody calls it, like, made a comic of Lightning at a GameStop holding Final Fantasy 13. This is Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13.
Which means Lightning didn't even really like Final Fantasy 13.
She
That's
was
a
like,
shame.
it's did I say it was the second best in the series, or did I say it was the worst in the series? I don't know. The trilogy. I think 15 is the worst.
That's okay. Liz, Dane, guys, come on.
Later.
Later.
We're gonna throw down
Because
into
if you're going
Denny's
to do
parking
that,
lot.
11's the worst in the series for me, but that's because I'm stuck at the 10-minute mark and I couldn't for like a month and a half.
Can we
I kind
get a
of agree with Leo
GTP
on that
throws
one,
down podcast where just Liz and I and whoever else can argue about things?
Yeah.
It's on the list.
Cool.
Only
Maddie-
if we are all required to wear boxing gloves.
Sure, I'm down for that.
It's actually a live stream out in the Denny's parking lot.
I'll meet you at Waffle House.
You want a grand slam? I'll give it to you. Pow!
Maddie, I see on your list here you have Digimon World. Could you speak to that? Because I love that game.
Same.
So it is a game that I'm like continue to be immensely fascinated with, because it's a game I've been a Digimon fan forever. It's probably my favorite anime of all time. And there's always been this thing with Digimon fans where it's like we've always really strived for good games. We've had decent games, but like Digimon always had the good anime and Pokemon had the good games. And it was always that kind of balance.
Mhm.
And I had Digimon World as a kid. I'm like 10 years old, and it's even as a kid there was something fascinating about it. I like wanted to play it even though I could not get very far in it. And one of the main mechanics of it is that you raise a Digimon and then it dies. And then you raise another Digimon and you use skills and stuff you've learned from your previous Digimon that get transferred to your new one. But as a kid, I was like, why did my Digimon die? I worked so hard on this Digimon, I leveled it up, I trained it, and now I have to start all the way from the beginning. And I mean, it's not a roguelike, but it's that similar concept where you have to start from the beginning over and over again. And as a kid, that was just like devastating. I couldn't move on, and I couldn't really comprehend this kind of way that you were supposed to progress through, like slowly and through redoing Digimon, and but it's an insanely like complex game, and there's all these mechanics in it that are really fascinating, but it's maybe not executed the best. It's hard to penetrate, it's hard to understand, especially for children, even for adults. And I think it's another one of those games where it's just like it's just a little too hard, and maybe your Digimon die like a little too quick, where it's just like it's you really have to kind of persevere a little harder than maybe I want to.
Yeah.
You're super right too on that. Like even in the 3DS remake that I have mentioned, I think I mentioned it to you on Twitter. That game, even the life cycle is still a little too short, but they really just turned everything else up to 11. I mean, it's such a good remake. But yeah, like all the stats and everything, all the mechanics, like in the original, are like they're really not explained to the player very well. So, because I was in the exact same boat as you growing up, totally lost. I'm like, I don't really understand what's happening. I expected something different. I'm not mad. I still like it.
Right. There was like that thing. There was something that like just like drew you in. That you're like, I like, oh, this is like so frustrating, but like I'm still there's something about this game. Like there and watching like over the last few years, I've like watched a lot of videos of people who like really go into the mechanics and really got to know this game and everything about it. And I'm just like, this game, it's very special, and there is so much work and thought put into it, and it just wasn't quite executed the best. But it's something that I have a whole bunch of respect for, and I've mentioned this on like Twitter multiple times. But the File City Night song is like one of the greatest pieces of video game music I've ever heard.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
This game has scarred me so much as a child that it has prevented me. I also love Digimon. I'm a big fan. I've had Cyber Sleuth in my Steam inventory. I've purchased it. I've wanted to play the game and that series of games. I hear good things about them. But I live in fear as to whether or not my Digimon are going to die in that game. And I
Like
can't...
Digimon Survive.
I can't...
Don't go away from that one if you're afraid of death.
I mean,
your Digimon will die.
And that's what... but it starts at Digimon World for me, because that has hit me where I lived at a very young age, that I have not been able to interact with other games that I really desperately want to play because of that fear of like, they're gonna die again. What am I gonna do?
And I think it was like, and it was so antithetical to the anime, right? Because the anime is all about you have this partner and you have this really close connection, and you get to see them and you get to see their new forms.
Yeah.
And I think that's an issue that, I understand why that might not work in a game, but, they tried to maybe go a little more Pokemon in some of the games. Cyber Sleuth is definitely a lot more Pokemon, and you have like a party and they have, different, and it's just, it's like, I haven't played all the Digimon games, and I have both Survive and, what's the other newer one?
Next Order?
Yeah, I have those both in my Steam library to check out. I know one of them is more like visual novel, but that's, fine. I don't care.
Exactly.
But I don't know if any of you have ever played the Digimon MMO.
Is that the Korean one?
I wanted to. I think
there was an English version and everything. I think I got into it.
I think it's
like
is it Digimon Masters?
Yes, Digimon Masters. I think in like 2011 or 2012, and it had already been out, I think, a few years then. I think it's still technically playable. I'm not sure, but
it's still available on Steam.
I got so addicted to that game, and I'm not a big MMO person. I had like a little WoW phase in high school and stuff, but it gave me that thing where it's like I think you could have 3 partners, but like you weren't collecting a bunch of Digimon, and you had like your partners, and you would just use the same ones over and over again, like like an MMO. And I think that because it gave me that, it's like, this is what I want. I want my one Digimon to focus on, like like an MMO, like a main character that you just keep leveling up.
Yeah.
And that really kind of gave me that satisfaction I was looking for.
You just blew my mind.
I was gonna say you broke Dane real bad, because I mean, looking at his reactions, like, this is a thing. What?
Like, I played a lot of MMOs in my time, but not this one. And like, yeah, I want to run around with an Omnimon. Like, who wouldn't want that?
Mhm.
Or
Yeah,
whatever.
I think I tried to play it like maybe a couple years ago just to kind of like try and recapture that magic, and it didn't work.
Oh, no.
Like I think it was just because it's one of those things where like they gave you like all these bonuses because it's like old now, and they like gave me all these extra bonuses at the beginning, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. There's like way too much going on, and I just want like my vanilla MMO back.
I get it.
I get that. Speaking of games that gave you too much too soon, one that I think would have been a much better game had they designed it better, is Driver. It has a notoriously bad tutorial.
It's so
Is that
difficult.
the parking garage?
That's
Yes.
the one with parking garage.
Yep.
That's the first
So-
stage. So Driver as a game was designed to mimic several different car-based movies. Gone in 60 Seconds, Bullet, and various other stunt-based car movies, which is
But
amazing.
Was it inspired by The Driver?
That thinks
I
so.
don't think most people know that movie, but
Yeah.
it's one of the movies I've seen for some reason.
It's a good cut.
But there's other ones. There's also I think it's The French Connection is another one. That was an
Yes,
inspiration.
that's another big one that was a part of that.
So there's all these cool things that that I think less than a tenth of the people who bought the game actually could get to because they got stuck in the tutorial. Because you
I
had
never
a
finished that tutorial.
checklist of all these stunt things that you need to know how to do, so that way you can do it. But you're stuck in a parking garage, so you don't have a whole lot of space to do everything.
That was me. That's
Mhm.
where that game died for
You
me.
have a laundry
You
list
know-
of shit to do to get out of that parking garage.
I had a similar issue with the tutorial for Jet Set Radio. I'm a big fan of Jet Grind Radio. So I'm a big fan of Jet Set Radio Future, and I had that on my Xbox, and I played the hell of it. And then I remember getting Jet Grind Radio, right? That's the first one.
Yeah.
I think I just got it on Steam, and I couldn't get past the tutorial. Like I couldn't combo well enough, and I'm like, am I just like really suddenly bad at this game? Like, did I lose everything that I was good at? And then I went back to Jet Set Radio Future, and I was like, oh no, like I can play this one. Why can't I play the first one?
That reminds me of when I Sunset Overdrive, because oh my god, the commercials for that were so fun, and I was super into it. And then I didn't get it for a long time, and then I finally got it on super sale on Steam, and the control scheme is so bonkers
Yeah.
that I think Steam shows I maybe played 10 minutes, and I was like, I do not think I can wrap my head around this. And it sucks because it's like, it is all style, it is super
Bright
fun.
colors.
Yeah, it's like it's so aesthetic and it's so interesting. And then I played it and was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Marketing did an amazing job with that game because
Yes.
I was kind of similar. Like I was hyped up. I like Insomniac. I was excited for that. I loved that I got to hear Yuri Lowenthal
I
because
love
that dude.
the trailers. I
Yeah,
love that dude
exactly.
just being like
the marketing was just on point. And then the game, it's like, oh man, this is kind of a mess to actually control.
yeah, rather than picking anything intuitive, it was like they were trying to do something neat and new, and it did not work.
Yeah, it's kind of impressive, like how we have very standardized controls now, and when you kind of break away from that, it can be pretty devastating.
It's it kind of reminds me, I'm gonna probably like lose a lot of people who might be listening, but trying to go back and replay the original Resident Evil 4 is so hard because
Not that bad.
I can understand, like I still absolutely love that, but it's probably because I've played it so many times that it's so ingrained. But I understand when you've been playing like modern over the shoulder shooters and you go back and you're like stopped and you're shooting and you're like, why am I stopped?
Yeah,
like,
well, and
it's
not even so much of that. Like I played so much of this game when it first came out. It was a game me and my sister played together. Like we loved it. But I a couple of years ago was like, I just want to go back and replay it. Like it's such a fun game. But for me, it was that rather than left trigger, right trigger to aim and shoot, it's left trigger is your knife and right trigger is to aim and then X is to shoot. And so I'm doing left trigger, right trigger, and I'm like, Leon's just doing like
He's doing a shimmy.
Yeah, he's just like he's swiping with his knife, but he's not even swiping because that's just to pull out your
Oh,
knife. You
that's
have to
the other
actually
guard.
press out the
Yeah.
press X. So it's like knife gun, knife, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm dying.
Look,
Yeah,
pretty boy Leon can only do one thing at a time. He can't
And
walk
I,
and
like-
shoot, and he can either pull out his knife or his gun. He can't do
And
both.
I don't even care that I can't walk and shoot at the same time. Like whatever. I played so much Resident Evil 4 and 5. But when I'm like, shoot, what are we doing? I was
Juggling.
so frustrated.
yeah. It's interesting because at some point controls got very standardized,
Mhm.
and then you're just like you expect things to work a certain way now, and when they don't, you're just like, well. And I actually have this issue with the Silent Hill 2 remake. They put your health drink on triangle,
Oh my god.
which like it's, and I kept accidentally taking my health items, and they were like, later in the game you get a lot more, but in the beginning of the game they're really scarce.
Mhm.
And I would like go, and then I'd be trying to look at my map or my inventory, and I would hit triangle, and I just chug a freaking, and he's like in full health too, and I'm like, why do you let me do this?
Yeah.
Why do you let me, like, this is just a freaking trap to let me chug my health drinks when I have like one of them, and I'm
Yeah.
like, and so it is like kind of interesting the way we get very into control schemes now, and it can be hard to break those habits these days.
Yeah, I've been playing Metaphor ReFantazio, the new Atlas game, and switching between that and Silent Hill 2, I have and then also so between that Silent Hill 2 and then I'm also like switching up between like the Alan Wake 2 DLC that just came out. And all of them have different things that you can do. So one of them you press, like I think Silent Hill 2, you press up on the D-pad to open your map. In one of them you press the touchpad. In one of them you press R1, and then you press. And so I'm like, what button is my map in this game that I'm playing? But we were playing Silent Hill 2, and Leo has been actually playing it with me. Well, he's been watching me play because I love scary games, but I'm a chicken in the moment. And so I am
like, the prostitute that you pay $50 to watch people play.
It's a GTA comic joke where it's like $50 for anything you want. It's like, sit in the room with me while I play Silent Hill 2 because I'm scared. And so Leo will sit with me, and he has watched me with 0 health drinks, 0 healing items, hitting triangle because that's to interact with something in one game. And he's like, what are you doing? And then accidentally drinking health drinks because I'm like so used to these other games I'm playing.
Yeah. So yeah, it is control schemes. I'm really excited. The Argonaut Games recently announced their remastering Croc, which is
that's a fun
PS1 platformer.
It's
But the original had tank controls.
Yep.
And even with those tank controls, I still love that game, but there was like a level of frustration with it. It was like, it's like how much does a game have to win me over to kind of compensate for something that I don't like very much.
Yeah.
Of course, with this like remaster, they're going to put in like modern controls, which is really exciting because I'm like, I think I'll be able to like enjoy this to the full extent now. And sorry, I was just going to bring up one more game. If anyone's played Killer 7, which is another one of Grasshopper's games, it has one of the weirdest unintuitive control schemes. It's like,
yes, it does.
it's like basically, it's like kind of on rails where it's like you're not pushing forward to go, you hold A to move forward, and you can turn around and go the other way, and you're like stuck on this rail, but you can kind of choose paths, and you can choose where you go, and you can turn around. And I think a lot of people start and it's just like immediately off turning. They're just like, what is this? Why does this game operate like none other game? There's no other game that has this control scheme.
I dug it, but that thing makes
I love it. Like it's one of my comfort games now, which is weird because when I first played it like terrified me. I was like, is this a horror game? But now it's just like it's
like where Superhot got their idea for like the enemy blast and explosions and stuff. It's like, nope, that Killer 7 is an important game here. It's a rail shooter, but at your pace.
Yeah, and I think part of it was because, Grasshopper before, like their first games were adventure games. Where you're moving forward and backward through hallways, and it kind of operates on almost a similar it has a similar feel. If you've played Silver Case and you've played Killer 7, you're like, these games, there's something about them. Or if you've played 25th Ward, especially, like the UI looks almost exactly like Killer 7 at times. But it's also like totally understandable for me when people go into this and they're like, why does this play like this? I don't understand.
Yeah, I played it on the PS2 back with I was on my sister's boyfriend's PS2 back, and I was like, I don't understand. I don't get this. It was so like weird, and I was like at the point where I really was developing like my gaming preferences, like finalizing my gaming preferences, and even then it's always evolving. And then years later, I was like, I really want to try it again. So I have a PS2 copy in my other room, and I have not tried it again.
Don't play it on PS2. That's
Play
fine.
it on
Play it on Steam. Play it on
Okay.
Steam. The Steam port is very good.
I wonder if I have it already.
PS2, it's usually like $5 on Steam.
Oh,
PS2 unfortunately suffered from like the really bad load times that a lot of PS2 ports. The GameCube version is actually very good if you can play the original, but it's expensive. But the Steam port is very good. So
That's upsetting. I mean,
sure.
awesome, but upsetting.
Sometimes
yeah, you know.
Yeah, it happens. What
Yeah.
is it? One of the best games when the PS2 first came out was Stuntman, and it was an amazing car game. But if you wrecked once, you had to wait like 5 minutes to reload the whole game.
Oh yeah, because it backloads everything.
Because
I
it
have
has
it
to
on
load
Steam.
everything for it. Yeah.
And that's a huge thing. Oh, awesome! Yay! Free we actually don't own this game, so it's advertising for Capcom. Yeah, like Punishment, that can be a real like load times, and it's like I can do a game if I die and have to restart a lot. One recent one that I really loved that unfortunately didn't get very much attention was the new Prince of Persia, which I absolutely loved. And it is a very difficult game. And it's interesting because a lot of people were comparing it to something like Celeste, where it has a lot of, it's Metroidvania, but then there's certain areas that have these very complicated, difficult platforming. And
It makes sense, 'cause
I
that's Prince of Persia. Like
Yeah.
even back in the first games, those were weird popular games.
yeah, and like I tried Celeste and I didn't really get into it, but I really enjoyed this Prince of Persia. And one of the reasons I was able to, some of these sequences, they would take me like 20 times to get through because they were so exact and you had to like figure out the timing for everything. But you would respawn instantly, so you could just instantly retry. And that's a big thing is, especially as I've gotten older, it's like I need games to respect my time. And like
Yes.
if I have to go back and redo a bunch of stuff just to get to a point where I'm going to die again, it's really frustrating. And it's also one of the reasons why like the Nintendo Online, how they give you the rewind stuff. Some people are like, oh, that's cheating, but I'm like, I don't have the time to die over and over again and have to play another 10 minutes to get back up to the same point and then just die again.
Especially
Yeah.
I can't
what I
tell you
don't
how
mind
many
about-
times. Oh.
Everybody has opinions all of a
I will
sudden.
step back.
It's why I don't mind playing games on easy. Like I used to always be like, well, I start on normal and I go from there. But now I'm like, you know what? Sometimes I just want to play on easy because I don't have the time to sit through being angry at, or even just like tougher battles. Like I just want to get through this. And so if I want to play a game on normal, I do. And if I want to play it on easy, I do. And I don't want to be judged. Or I don't care if I'm judged.
I definitely agree with that. Speaking of Prince of Persia, there were many times where in the Warrior Within, I would try to do a time jump off of something, jump into a pit, die, rewind just to have it catapult me right back into the same pit. And
That is
then,
not just that. That is
and
every
then
single one of those
reload.
games.
Well, yeah, right, and then reload, right? So not only do I die once, basically, I rewind. I'm like, okay, we're fine, but it hasn't me do it again. I die again, no rewind left, and then I have to reload the game, and it absolutely, it did not feel like my time was being very well prioritized in that feeling at that moment.
God, I love though the rewind feature when it comes to retro games, especially for like because I was going through the Mega Man series, and I'm like, I suck at Mega Man. I think out of all of them, I've beaten one on my own. Love the Mega Man series.
They're brutal. They're very difficult games.
Oh, yeah. I've never. I never played Mega Man growing up, and my friend gifted me 9, I think, which was the one on the Wii. It was like my first Mega Man. I think that's considered one of the most difficult ones, also.
Yes.
And so I'm like playing. I couldn't get through a single level. I'm like, I've never played Mega Man, and this is insanely hard. So I like just never got anywhere.
They developed that based off of, I think, the original Mega Man in terms of visual aesthetics and design, and I think press kits for that were actual NES cartridges that functioned in an NES, but I could be mistaken. Those press kits are insanely expensive to get.
Huh.
But yeah, I guess.
We are pro rewind feature here.
Yes, yeah.
That actually brings me to one of the games that actually has a rewind feature for it. This is it was made by Eidos. It was Total Overdose. It's I think the full title is Total Overdose: A Gunslinger's Tale in Mexico, and it's a game that basically is Max Payne, but if you added a score system and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater as your influence on there. It's literally like that was the advertising campaign, which was, what if you took Max Payne with Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and here you get this.
A bright and campy Max Payne is Total Overdose.
Now, to Brandon's point, for something that happened earlier in the episode, the points is the EXP system in that game. So the cooler that you do more stuff, the more EXP you're earning to unlock cooler things to do. But to make the whole thing work right, the graphics were really poor, even for a PS2 title. And like one of the coolest things to do is get into a car, drive, and just jump out of the car and let it go into wherever you need it to crash into. And if you do that, though, it was such a weird feeling on that, because it feels like you just open door, closed door, and those are your only two options, and the door weighs like 800 pounds for no real reason. But it went it had a open world concept and a closed world concept, so the main parts of the game are taking place outside of the open world, which is just this one town. In this one town, you can just explore different places in there, which is fun, and there's hidden points and hidden things everywhere. Didn't catch on. It was like, I think people wanted a more, if you were used to Max Payne as the other shooter, you were more for a noir setting, down to earth, not this weird, you can call a luchador to come punch somebody in the face. That's a special ability you can just have, or throw a piñata and let this explode wherever it was. But the coolest concept to that is, the cooler that the more points that you racked up, it racked up a combo, and this combo would then in turn change how your background music was. And a lot of the background music in there is metal Mexican bands.
That's cool.
Probably the most famous one in there is Molotov, from which they did. They have a famous song called Apocalypse Shit, but you hear it in it's in the first episode of Breaking Bad. But it's also in another game too, but I can't remember its name. It was a game where you're like a superhero cop that just kept getting more and more powers, but it was for the Xbox back in the day.
Speaking of Total Overdose, I don't know what it is about
Peggy
this time
18.
period. Peggy 18.
Did not expect that to happen.
No
What
problem.
was that?
Me
Police
clicking a thing
chase?
on Steam, and it automatically started playing with volume.
Are you old enough, Brandon?
Crackdown?
Are you
Crackdown,
old
that's
enough
the
for
name
a
of it.
Peggy 18 game?
Am I old enough?
Are you
physically, yes.
Are you over the hill? Are you 35 yet?
Not quite. I've got a year left, I think.
At 38,
Oh,
you must retire.
must
Come
be
on.
nice.
Shit.
What is
What I
this,
find funny
Logan's
about
Run?
the cover of Total Overdose, it has a man on the cover holding a double-barrel shotgun in a very similar pose, and it feels like there's a number of games that use this almost exact same cover art, where he's pointing one pew pew at the person reading the box, right? And he's got another one that he's holding, and
It's really funny because it reminds me of the main concept art for Raiden from Metal Gear, because he's holding a sword, and then he has a gun like this, and then he's holding his sword.
Yeah. I think
it's a very cool guy pose.
It's a very cool
one of the
guy
Red
pose.
Deads, I think, has a very similar image to
I
this.
mean, how else are you gonna hold two guns?
I mean, I guess, right? I just think it's funny that I would almost like a super cut of just PS2 games where somebody's holding two weapons in this pose.
Yeah, so thinking of this, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, so I'm gonna give it to you guys. But I'm thinking of games that were divisive because of maybe technical limitations. And if they got ones that may have gotten remasters, and the remaster did a lot better just because, it was able to handle things better.
I got one right off the top of my head.
Sorry, you go ahead, Leo. I'll go next.
Resident Evil Outbreak. It was designed as a multiplayer survival horror game, but its technical limitations made it so that way they had to use the same system each time. Well, like one of the biggest problems was that you had an in-game conversation piece, but you didn't know how, but it didn't make sense to work with what they were saying because it was supposed to be
they had pre-designed phrases that the characters could select and say.
So it wasn't like over here or stay back.
I wish we had that.
Like it was like just like pre-recorded elements, and you could respond, but it doesn't make any sense because they didn't have any voice chat integration.
Yeah, and they designed it as like a level-based system, so you were playing one scenario, and there's 10, and I think there was 4 or 5 scenarios, but nobody played online past the first scenario because all the other scenarios was either harder or nobody knew what it is. In order to succeed in the game, you had to have already beaten the game to know where everything is, and they randomize where the things are sometimes. So, but you get the same rewards for playing the other levels, so there was no incentive to play the other levels. But as a technical feat for it, every character ran. In order to make the game work right for a multiplayer system, they used the same janky but backdated controller system for Resident Evil 1. Not even 2, 1 to make it all work right because they needed in order to save the space for multiplayer for it.
So less snappy and less responsive control setup,
and even less zombies in general. They had something artificial in there where everyone was infected with a virus, so if you just took too long, you
can use healing items to slow down the progression of the virus.
This doesn't have a remake, but I'm just saying if Capcom wanted to
I thought the cat was part of the thing.
Remake the cat.
Remake the cat.
Come on,
cat's
Capcom.
Already perfect. You can't make it any better.
Release the cat cut, all right?
That's my cat, Ashley.
She has almost no teeth. Yeah, she only has her bottom canines and her front teeth, so her lip gets stuck on her teeth a lot.
It's very cute.
Anyway, Liz.
Sorry, she just came over, and so I was like, well, I got to show her off.
Yeah. Thank you. What was the game you were going to talk about?
Yeah.
Thank you for cat.
Sorry.
If you don't tell this the game you're going to talk about, I'm going to go next.
Oh, I was saying, Outbreak doesn't have a remaster or a remake or anything, but if Capcom wanted to, they should.
I'd be down.
Yeah,
I mean, cool. I really enjoyed the concept, and if you're playing online too, it was really interesting because you could, if you were the first person to have your infection go, you would then be able to move around as a zombie, like still in that same character model. But you could basically surprise and spook your other players by suddenly they enter the room, turn around, and you just grab and bite them. And they're like, what?
But the idea behind keep in mind, this is like what, 90 late
This
90s?
is like 2001.
Early 2000s, yeah.
Outbreak.
But keep in mind, the idea of a multiplayer survival horror game, which, for anyone who's seen all those zombie movies, how many times is this just one guy going through everything? It's like never. Even like Zombieland, you have a group of people to do that to work with, and just the idea as a multiplayer survival horror, I would love that.
It was actually probably later than 2001, if I'm being honest. I'm just spitballing.
It was later enough that they had still a PlayStation 2, but
it was late enough that it shouldn't have been using PS1 assets inside the code.
One of the games that I think that the technical limitations really did stymie its growth, that was then fixed not by a remake or a remaster, but was fixed in a sequel, was the hit Wii title Red Steel.
Oh, yes.
And followed by Red Steel 2. Red Steel was a launch game, used the motion controls, was sort of groundbreaking for like what they were trying to do with it, but was not executed very well. I remember having a lot of fun with it. I was a school age kid at that point, high school, junior high, I can't quite remember, but my friends and I like camped out in front of the Best Buy to get a Wii, and that was the first game I bought with with my Wii system. So I have fond memories of it, even though the game itself wasn't very good, right? The nunchuck and Wiimote controls were not as well fleshed out. Well, when they released Red Steel 2, they had kind of overhauled that system, and I think it's not Wii U Pro controller, the Super Wii U controller that they had the like bonus sensor on. I don't remember what it was called.
The Motion
Motion
Plus.
Plus.
Motion Plus.
Motion
Thank
Plus.
you. Super Wii U 2. I don't know.
New Super Wii U.
Oh, dang it! You got me there. When that came out, I think it came out around the same time that Red Steel 2 did debut, and it really seemed to make a difference. And so these hack and slash shooting controls were much more responsive to the motion sensor than it was in the original. And so I really do feel like Red Steel was almost there and tried its best, but fell a little bit short due to technical limitations.
I have one, but it's not technical limitations. It's just that it wasn't very good.
It doesn't work for this one.
It was. Well, no, it was the bouncer.
I love the bouncer though.
I do love the bouncer. It's just
Terrible game.
I love the opening. Just the
No.
bouncer.
I love the bouncer, like
Yeah.
overall, but when you're playing it, you can tell it's not a good game.
It's
It was
like thinking about playing it's more fun than playing it.
Yeah,
That
Like
is-
your memories are so much better than the actual game.
Yes, and it also sucks because there's a couple characters, so it's like a 1 hour-ish, maybe 2 hour tops JRPG section, but it's like a beat 'em up JRPG, and you can choose between playing 3 different characters, but you can choose between you can switch them up before each battle, but if you switch them up before each battle, you're not leveling them up evenly enough because each time you go through the JR or like the story segment, it gets harder. And so if you focused on leveling it, like, oh, I'm gonna play as Sion this time, and then Ko this time, and Volt this time, well, the next time it gets harder, now you can't play as anybody because none of them are leveled up enough to get through the next time. And you can actually just the boss fights get harder as you go, and then there's the fighting portion of the game, so you level up the characters in the story portion so you can play them in the fighting portion. And the fighting portion, you have characters that can stun lock the others, and if you can get somebody in those like stun locks, it's not a fun time unless you're the one doing the stun locking, but it's a really fun game. It's just
Question
not
mark?
good, but it really was like the predecessor to like the style of Final Fantasy X and Kingdom Hearts. That was it. That's not on the topic of like technical limitations, but I thought of it
no,
as
it's
like
still it is. I mean, it is a beloved game that sucks.
I don't know.
Yes.
Beloved might be a stretch.
Beloved by some.
Yeah.
I love it. I actually got a PS2
Beloved by
multi-tap so
one.
I could play it with my friends, but
1 in
That's
5
That's probably the only way to
podcasters
play it.
loves the bouncer.
huh?
I said 1 in 5 podcasters loves the bouncer.
I have a multi-tap, Dane. If you want to become the second one, we
I'm
can
here
play
for
it
it.
together.
I'm here for
Throw
it.
down.
Yeah,
Sweet.
yeah, it is. I know this has kind of become slightly like a remaster podcast, but it is like the one example I can think of people like a remaster kind of replacing the original is Resident Evil 1, where
Yes.
almost
Yep.
everybody, even though it's different, and even though the original Resident Evil is very beloved, it's almost everyone's just like the remaster is the way to play it.
Yeah, that's become like that's replaced the original in terms of people's like personal canon for the
Yeah.
series. It's like everybody's like, if there's one Resident Evil you play, it's the remake.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because in that case, you don't have a divisive game, right? The original Resident Evil, I mean, people make poke fun at the voice acting and things like that, but it's considered one of the quintessential greatest horror, survival horror games of all time.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, when you have a remaster, then you kind of look back and you're like, this was pretty clunky and pretty going back to it, you're like, all right, this maybe wasn't as great, but it was so important and it was so unique that you could kind of overlook all these difficult elements that normally might make something more divisive. But just because it was so iconic and it did so many things so well, and it did, just horror so well, that,
Yes.
it was just like, well, we can overlook kind of how difficult the controls can be and how goofy the voice acting is, because everything else is just so mind-blowing.
Yeah, the sound of footsteps from the very, very first PS1 Resident Evil is like a core memory for me. I just remember I was 12. My birthday is exactly 2 weeks before Christmas. And so 2 weeks after I turned 12, we got a PS1 and Resident Evil 1. And there is just the sound of the clock ticking, and the footsteps is just like a core memory to me. And I love it. I know remake is better, and like, yeah, I'll join in making fun of the bad voice acting and stuff, but like, dude, that game means so much.
I guess the absence of a creative behind something, would that make it divisive? I mean, Maddie has down here Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops, and that's the first, well, not the first portable Metal Gear Solid game, but the first 3D one, and without Kojima's like input really at all.
The technical problem is there's no Kojima.
Yeah, that's the technical limitation.
Well, and that one's so weird because he's like gone back and forth about whether it's canon or not, and it's like he's like, I'll never tell you. And it's like, well, thanks.
I need to know though.
But one of the reasons I included this was because when I was playing through all the series, there's always people giving input, and I'm like, I'm going to play all of them. And a lot of people were like, you don't need to play Portable Ops, just like watch the cutscenes on YouTube and stuff. And I'm like, well, no, I want to play all of them. And I definitely get why people said you don't have to, because it's a PSP game, and a lot of PSP games obviously had the issue of having a single control stick, which made it hard to control. But Portable Ops is really important because it's like a predecessor to Peace Walker, which is a predecessor to V in the whole recruitment thing. And but they hadn't come up with Fultons yet, which are the main way you recruit people in the future games. So you had to literally drag every single recruit back to your truck. And it's a weird mechanic, and you're like doing this, and you're just like spending all your time grabbing a guy and then just hauling him back to your truck and throwing him in, and it's so ridiculous. And then it's kind of like, and then you can like play as all these guys you recruit, and you kind of have like a squad of 4 people that you play as every time. And it's like it's really very messy, but again, it's very innovative, and it's such an important concept that they are trying out that obviously led to this very, very important structure that they wanted to continue in Peace Walker and V. But I'm very glad I played it, but I definitely like understand why people might not want to.
Yeah, I was really put off exactly like you were with the idea of like, I have to drag this guy all the way to this one truck, really? And I mean, a big thing, I guess, is that without Kojima's input, that's why people say it's non-canon, right? And a lot of people will say, well, anything in Portable Ops, or Poops, as it's referred to by the general
by
community.
People who know what they mean. It's really funny because they're like its official abbreviation is MPO. It's not Poops, it's MPO.
Yeah, well, there's 2 Portable Ops games. I'm going to say the first one's Pops, the second one's Poops. But
that's unfortunate.
Like they basically come to the conclusion that Pops and Poops are canon as long as shut up, Leo. As long as Peace Walker doesn't contradict it. Which, I mean, okay, I'll accept that. And I liked that Campbell was introduced in it, but then they did nothing with that. I mean, again, Kojima not involved, so he has no obligation.
Well, he's the producer. He's not on the writing staff.
Right, yeah. And producer, not director. The differential there for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, I thought the mechanics were okay for it, and just I think that Peace Walker was the appropriate evolution.
Yeah,
that
definitely.
whole concept in terms of like, well, let's take away some of these extra functions or make them context sensitive in some way, so you can have that camera control with the face buttons.
And well, and one thing too that Portable Ops did was you had like your squadron of 4, and you could like switch between them on the map, which is interesting, but it just didn't do much. And they kind of realized, they're like, we're not sure if this is like adding much to our game. It's better to just go in as a single person. But it's still like an interesting concept where you could kind of hide people and they'd be in their little cardboard box. And then if you wanted to switch to them, so then sometimes it'd be easier to like drag someone back to your car because you're like switching between, and you could leave one guy over there. And so it's like, you know, it was like interesting, and they're really interesting ideas. And then they took the best part of those ideas and put them into Peace Walker.
Mm-hmm. And that sort of is a good segue towards the end of this. Because innovation doesn't mean necessarily bad, just bad for the time or
divisive rather,
or very divisive, because essentially it didn't work right for one reason or another. Some of the games that we've been talking about, it's either the mechanics didn't work right, or they put tried too much for something that couldn't handle it, or bad timing could be what it's at, or even just art assets just not clicking with everybody. What was it? Stardew Valley was made as I think way back when, as hey, this is what I can do with programming, and it's one of the biggest games out there. So with that, I think anybody else have anything else to say, or any other games they want to mention real quick?
I had a game earlier and I cannot remember it, and I was so disappointed in myself because I was like, oh no, I'm not going to write it down. I'll remember it. I'll bring it up next.
Gone forever.
Should have written it down.
Yeah, I know how that goes. There was another one I put on here, was Fatal Frame Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, for the simple fact that they tried the thing that everyone was wanting to do with the Wii, which is, how can we take the Wii remote and make it feel like you are the one actually performing the action, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I mean, in a lot of respects, the Wii was like doing VR, but not with motion on your head and making you want to vomit. So, like, how can we make it so your actions affect in-game? And the idea, I think, for that was that effectively the Wii remote was the character's right hand, since most people are right-handed. And in doing that, they had to change things like camera arrangement, like how that whole thing functioned, because generally there was an ambient isometric kind of camera in each room for a lot of the Fatal Frames prior to this one. And this one, they basically turned it into for the lack of a better term, a Resident Evil 4-like. Camera directly behind you, Wii remote points stuff around. Character always has the flashlight in their hand. But when they did that, something didn't jive the same, so it felt like they were relying more on jump scares throughout the game along with it. And to the effect of like, oh, well, if you're going to go and if you have to go through a door, you have to actually take the remote, go out, grab the doorknob, and turn it. And they emphasize jump scares in that time frame even. So like, oh, they make a big deal out of moving in to, turn the knob. And I'm wondering if like attempting these subtleties like that, like the subtle movement kind of ideas for the control, is what really hurt the game or not. Because I didn't hear a whole lot of one way or another on it. I just remember it's like, it's not coming out over here.
But they just remastered it though, didn't they?
They did. And I was curious if they fixed that.
Yeah, well, and that's another one, because that's a Grasshopper game where the original is, but we didn't have anything to do with the remaster.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I honestly don't know. I'm not very familiar with the Fatal Frame series.
I want to play more of them. That's what I know, because a lot of it's centered around like old school type of Japanese horror. Think like the ideas behind elements of The Grudge, or that's probably going to be the best example I'm going to have. The Ring. Just some of those like more subtle, more like, oh, this is more weird than anything. That's what makes it scary, I guess.
Yeah, the first two games scared me a lot. Like, there's some of the few horror games that I can't even play because they scare me. But I watched somebody else play the second game. Well, the first two, but the second one, if you like the story and like how beautiful and tragic Silent Hill 2 is, I think the story for Fatal Frame 2 is comparable to how beautiful and tragic Silent Hill 2 is.
I think at some point they even transitioned to like referring to elements of their games as beautiful horror.
I mean, there are some of those. there's a few games that I feel reach that level, and definitely Silent Hill 2 is like tragic, but like has a beautiful story in my opinion, and Fatal Frame 2 hits that mark.
Yeah, Fatal Frame 2 is the one I have the most experience with myself. So I
It's
mean,
so creepy.
it's
I can't
really
play it.
kind of disturbing. Yeah, it's
It's
one
so
of those perfect
scary.
Halloween games, honestly, because the
No,
atmosphere.
I can't even play it. It's so scary. It's not perfect Halloween material for me.
Okay, so minus Liz, got it.
I have one more. Sorry, before we go.
No, perfect.
for
That
it.
was I was giving you time.
Silent Hill Shattered Memories on the Wii was innovative. It really depends on the person on if it landed or not, because it has like the Wiimote acts as your flashlight
So
and
yeah, I
where
was
you're
gonna say, it
looking,
did similar things that
and
they
it
did
had
with this one.
and it used the speaker on the Wiimote to act as like your cell phone, and so you could actually like hear it through the Wiimote. And there were aspects of it that did and didn't land, but it was less the software, or less, sorry, the Wii hardware, and more the fact that like the other world sequences are just like chase segments, and that you don't really fight the enemies, you just fight them off and you run from them. And I think that's something that doesn't land with a lot of people, which is also why I think Haunting Ground, besides coming out like 3 months after Resident Evil 4, I feel like that's also why Haunting Ground kind of didn't land very
Yeah.
well. But I love Shattered Memories. I think that's another one that tells a really good story, but very tragic. And that was it. That's my last one. I remembered it this time.
Good job.
I've got two games I'll mention very quickly. Pokemon Conquest, which I think was pretty well received, but was a departure from the Pokemon
That's
formula.
the one where you was in the history books, right? Like
It was
Yeah.
Nobunaga's Ambition.
Yeah, it's Nobunaga's Ambition combined with Pokemon, which is two games that I love very much. So it was like Nintendo was like, "Hey man, you want this game?" And I was like, "Yes, please, thank you."
Just for you.
Yeah,
They
pretty
dialed
much.
your number specifically.
Get this man a Pokemon game stat. But I don't think it sold very well for a Pokemon game, and I don't think it will ever see like a sequel or a remaster or a remake. But I loved it, and that's good enough for me. The other thing I just wanted to say was everybody please go check out Shadows of the Damned Hella Remastered. Honestly, it's an amazing game. The first one was amazing, the remaster's also good. So
Super fun.
It's definitely divisive. So.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it is a bit of its time, as we've mentioned previously.
Yeah.
But
You gotta go in with kind of like a more than tongue-in-cheek sense of humor.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But I think even at the time it was not super well received. It was, I mean, it's kind of all Grasshopper games are always kind of like middling. I think like Lollipop Chainsaw is really the only one to have done decently well. I think that's our only game that's done over 1 million copies. And Shadows of the Damned, for people who don't know, it has a very complicated development history where it started out as a survival horror game, and EA came in and they were like, no, we want something that the Western audience will love. And it's like, the Western audience loves survival horror games. What are you talking
What
about?
Are you doing?
Yeah.
But and it's one that, it got changed and it became something totally different than the initial idea. And for a while, I think it was something that Suda had trouble coming to terms with, because it was like, this was so different than what we initially wanted to do. But over time, I think he ended up being like, well, even though it wasn't what we planned to do originally, we still really like this game. It's still really fun. We love Garcia. We love these characters. So much so that they added a whole level in Travis Strikes Again, that's like basically a fake sequel to Shadows of the Damned.
It was such a good part of that game. It just blew my mind when I got there.
And of
Caught me
course, Travis
completely
Strikes
off
Again, another one that's very divisive, that also is very yellow on Metacritic, and that for some reason they put the Metacritic score of like 67 in the No More Heroes 3 trailer.
Yeah. I remember that.
It's like remember the spinoff you didn't play? Come play the actual sequel.
Which is super important, and you should play if you're going to play No More Heroes 3.
Yeah, it's like lore-wise, it is the center of the Grasshopper universe, where it makes references to like basically every single other game that they've made, which is it's just so funny. It is very Suda, but yeah, yeah, so Shadows of the Damned, it's one of those things where it was like, it took a while for Suda to be like, even though this wasn't what we wanted to do originally, we still ended up making a really fun game and something that we love a lot and characters that we love a lot. So
Yeah. Garcia's amazing.
Garcia's very cool. Garcia's a very good character, yeah.
I don't know. I've always been kind of a Johnson dude myself.
I mean, Johnson's also rad.
Yeah.
So with that, yes, we're gonna wrap up the show here. Now, for those in the audience, I mean, let us know what innovative but divisive games that you might know. Just because this isn't even a cornerstone of the whole list of things that are out there. And there's been games going from as far back as the 80s to as recent as 2024, which has happened to have games that were like, we're trying something new and different. Missed the mark on this one. But yeah, with that being said, our next episode is going to be on December 6th. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you, Maddie, again, for especially coming on the show with us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, if people wanted to find you on the internet, where should they go?
Yeah, you can find me pretty much everywhere: Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, as Oh That's Raspberry. That's the letter O, That's Raspberry. On my website's ohthat'sraspberry.com, where you can find an archive of all my comics.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm. And I'll have links for that in the description. That being said, thanks everybody for coming, and this is Gaming Theater Podcast. Logging out. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See ya.
Gaming Theater Podcast is hosted, created, produced, and edited by Leo Garcia, the Geek Scorpio. Our music is A Drinking Game. Stock media provided by Stormwave Audio /Pond5. Our cover art is by Adam Parker. You can find him at ParkerGFX on Twitter. If you want to send us some money to help with these episodes, you can do so at patreon.com/gamingtheaterpresents. Want to send support that doesn't hit your wallet? Please leave a review with wherever you hear your podcasts and share our podcast with your friends. It really helps out. Thank you for listening.